I want you to stop for a moment and just be here right now. Let the noise of the day fade into the background and listen to the quiet. You already know what I'm about to say because you felt it building for a long time. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that has absolutely nothing to do with how many hours you slept last night. It is the tiredness of carrying potential that you haven't yet acted on. It is the heavy realization that settles in when the house is finally silent, everyone else has gone to bed, and you are left staring at the ceiling, fully aware of the gap between the life you are living right now and the life you know you are meant for. You hold a smile in place during the day, going through the motions, answering the emails, nodding at the meetings, being exactly who everyone needs you to be. But underneath it all, something has gone entirely quiet. A profound disconnection between your daily actions and your deeper truth. You are not broken and you are not failing, but you are painfully aware that time is slipping through your fingers. That silence in the middle of the night, that is your own truth demanding to be heard. I need you to understand that carrying this unspoken truth is not a sign of weakness. It is a profound, heavy weight, and simply keeping it balanced on your shoulders costs you an immense amount of energy every single day. You have been holding it together for so long, making sure nothing breaks, making sure no one around you feels the tremor of your own internal earthquake. That kind of endurance is respectable, but it is not a strategy for a life well lived. The cost of that silent endurance is your own vitality. It drains the color from your days and leaves you operating on a baseline of quiet desperation. Naming that cost, looking directly at what you have been paying just to maintain the status quo, is the very first step toward reclaiming your own life. But here is what I know, and I need you to lean in and hear this clearly. What if the very isolation you are feeling right now is not a punishment, but a preparation? What if that deep, unsettling quiet is not an empty room, but a cleared foundation? I am not asking you to change everything before the sun comes up. I am simply asking, what if you stopped fighting the silence and finally let it teach you what it has been trying to say all along? This is not motivation. This is a mirror. Over the time we spend together right now, I am going to show you exactly what it looks like to stop negotiating with your own potential. We are going to strip away the noise, the expectations of people who haven't earned a say in your life, and the comfortable lies you have been telling yourself just to get through the week. I promise you this, if you stay with me, if you allow yourself to look honestly at the reflection I am holding up, you will walk away from this moment with a clarity so sharp it will cut through every excuse you have ever made. But you have to choose to be here. You have to commit to this quiet space. Because the truth is, the most profound transformations do not happen in the spotlight, surrounded by applause. Legacy is built in silence, when no one is watching. And that brings us to the reality of what it actually takes to build something enduring. It brings us to a concept you must master before anything else can change. It brings us to what I call the ledger law. The ledger law is the uncompromising reality that success, in any meaningful form, is never owned. It is only rented, and the rent is due every single day. But what no one tells you is the currency that rent demands. People think the cost of greatness is just hard work, sweat, and long hours. That is the beginner's illusion. The true cost, the hidden ledger of high achievement, is paid in the silent forfeiture of comfort. It is paid in the deliberate distancing from relationships that anchor you to your past rather than pulling you toward your future. It is paid in the ego death required to admit that what got you to this point is completely insufficient to get you where you are going. You have a ledger running in your life right now, whether you acknowledge it or not. Every time you choose distraction over deep work, every time you choose a comfortable conversation over a necessary confrontation, you are writing a debt into that ledger, and the clock doesn't negotiate. Eventually, the balance must be settled. Are you prepared to look at the debts you have accumulated through your own inaction? You pay for the life you want, or you pay for the life you settle for, but either way, you pay. You pay with the pain of discipline, which is heavy but builds your foundation, or you pay with the pain of regret, which is hollow and destroys your soul. You pay by isolating yourself for a season to focus purely on your own execution, or you pay by remaining trapped in a crowd that is walking confidently in the wrong direction. The ledger does not care about your intentions, your excuses, or how tired you feel. It only records action and inaction. When you finally decide to stay silent and build in the dark, you stop trying to convince other people of your value, and you start proving it to yourself. You stop debating your potential in the comments section of life, and you start putting points on the board where no one can argue with them. You don't need more information. You need more honesty. Your current situation is the exact reflection of the entries you have made in your own ledger. Let us look closely at the first major expense on this hidden ledger, the absolute destruction of your comfort zone. We are biologically wired to seek comfort, to find the warmest place, the path of least resistance, and the easiest routine. But greatness is deeply unnatural. It requires you to act in direct opposition to your own survival instincts. When you decide to stay silent and focus on yourself, you are choosing to walk out into the cold. You are choosing the heavy weight over the empty couch, the difficult book over the mindless screen, and the agonizing uncertainty of building something new over the anesthetizing safety of the familiar. Comfort is a slow, silent killer of potential. It whispers that you have done enough for today, that you can start tomorrow, that you deserve a break. But every time you agree with that whisper, you make a withdrawal from your future to pay for your present. The most dangerous place you can ever be is comfortable, because in that space, you stop paying attention, you stop growing, and you begin to slowly decay without even realizing it. The second expense is one that most people simply refuse to pay, which is why they remain exactly where they are. You must pay the toll of relational distance. As you elevate your standards, as you stop talking and start executing, the people around you are going to feel the shift. And let me tell you the harsh truth. Not everyone wants you to succeed. Your growth becomes a glaring mirror reflecting their own complacency. They will call you obsessed. They will say you have changed. And they will try to pull you back into the behaviors that make them feel safe. This is where your silence becomes your greatest weapon. You do not argue with them. You do not try to explain your vision to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You simply let the distance grow. Protecting your energy requires you to ruthlessly audit your circle. You are the average of the expectations of the people you spend the most time with. If you are surrounded by people who are comfortable with mediocrity, their gravity will eventually pull you down. You must be willing to walk alone for a season. The third and perhaps most excruciating payment on this ledger is ego death. We all carry a story about who we are, how smart we are, and what we deserve from the world. But when you step into the arena of true self-focus, that story is going to be ripped apart. You are going to discover that many of the things you firmly believe are completely wrong. You will realize that your previous successes were partly luck, and that your current failures are entirely your own fault. This realization is crushing to the ego. It requires you to look in the mirror and admit that you are not yet the person capable of holding the vision you have in your head. Unlearning is vastly more difficult than learning. It means setting aside your pride, sitting quietly in your own inadequacy, and doing the grueling, unglamorous work of rebuilding your foundation brick by brick. The ego wants to announce its arrival. The spirit knows it must quietly earn its place. You must let the version of yourself that needs applause die, so the version of yourself that requires only results can finally breathe. Understand that the ledger works in both directions through the brutal law of compounding interest. Every silent, disciplined choice you make today seems insignificant in isolation. Waking up an hour earlier, holding your tongue when provoked, reading 10 pages of philosophy instead of scrolling through outrage. These microscopic actions do not yield immediate, visible results. And this is exactly where the weak give up. They put in 3 weeks of silent work, see no monumental shift in their reality, and return to the noise. But the ledger remembers. Just as debt compounds silently until it bankrupts you, disciplined action compounds silently until it makes you undeniable. You are depositing small, heavy coins into an account that you cannot withdraw from for years. But when the interest finally hits, it hits with the force of an avalanche. The people who are watching you will call it an overnight success. They will call it luck. They will never see the thousands of silent, uncelebrated moments where you chose the difficult right over the easy wrong. The ledger is always balancing. This immutable law of compounding effort brings us to a profound misunderstanding of how the world distributes its rewards. We have been conditioned by a noisy, impatient culture to wait for our big break. We are told that if we just hold on, the stars will align, the right person will notice us, and the door will magically swing open. This is a comforting lie that keeps millions of people paralyzed in a state of permanent potential. I want to introduce you to what I call the readiness doctrine. Opportunity is not a matter of luck, and it is not a mysterious force that taps chosen individuals on the shoulder. Opportunity is nothing more than the violent collision of extreme preparation with a moment in time that cannot wait. The world is moving entirely too fast to wait for you to get ready. If a massive door opens today, and you have to spend the next 3 months sharpening your skills, fixing your broken mindset, and getting your chaotic life together, that door is going to close with someone else on the other side of it. Let me reframe how you think about this waiting period. You are not waiting for your season to arrive. Your season is waiting for you to become the caliber of person who can actually survive it. Think about the thing you are praying for, the goal you write down every morning, the life you secretly believe you are destined to live. If you were handed that exact reality this very afternoon, the wealth, the responsibility, the relationship, the platform, would your current habits be able to sustain it? Or would the immense weight of that success completely crush you because your internal foundation is built on sand? The tragedy of the modern world is not that people do not get opportunities. The tragedy is that they get exactly what they asked for, and it destroys them because they lack the character to carry it. The readiness doctrine demands that you build the massive infrastructure of a heavyweight life long before the heavy materials ever arrive on a job site. You build in the dark so you don't collapse in the light. What does it actually mean to build this infrastructure in the dark? It means you adopt the standards of the elite before you have the title, the salary, or the recognition. You wake up early when you have absolutely nowhere to be, because the act of conquering the mattress is the destination itself. You push your physical body to exhaustion in the gym when there is no competition on the calendar, because your own internal standard is the only judge that truly matters. You protect your silence and focus entirely on your own execution, not because you are angry or antisocial, but because you are fiercely committed to becoming an undeniable force of nature. You do not rise to the level of your grand, sweeping goals. You fall heavily to the exact level of your daily systems. And if you are completely honest with yourself right now, your current systems are perfectly designed to produce the exact mediocre results you are currently experiencing. To change the output, you must ruthlessly audit and completely rebuild the input. Readiness is not a state of mind. It is a demonstrable daily fact. It is proven in the micro decisions that no one will ever applaud you for making. It is proven when you are exhausted, when your motivation has completely evaporated, and you still execute the plan exactly as it was written. This is why staying silent is so critical. When you talk about what you are going to do, your brain releases a premature dose of dopamine. You feel the satisfaction of the achievement without having paid the price of the effort. You trick yourself into feeling like a winner while your reality remains entirely unchanged. By sealing your lips and focusing inward, you deny yourself that cheap, unearned satisfaction. You force the pressure to build internally. That pressure has to go somewhere. And if it cannot escape through your words, it will be channeled entirely into your actions. You become a coiled spring, packing more and more kinetic energy into your system every single day. That is what true readiness feels like. It feels like dangerous potential. And then, inevitably, the moment of collision arrives. The market shifts, a crisis emerges, a key position opens, or a sudden demand for true competence appears. In this moment, the talkers, the performers, and the people who spent their energy managing their image are instantly exposed. They scramble, they make excuses, they try to conjure up skills they never actually practiced. But you simply step forward. You do not need to hype yourself up. You do not need to announce your arrival. Your energy enters the room before you even open your mouth. You execute with a calm, terrifying precision, because you have already fought and won this battle 1,000 times in the silence of your own mind. People will watch you handle the pressure with unshakable grace, and they will wonder how you make it look so effortless. They will not understand that the effortlessness was paid for in advance, with years of silent, agonizing, unglamorous repetition. The collision moment does not create your character, it merely reveals it to the world. But the readiness doctrine goes beyond just seizing the moment. It is about surviving the aftermath. Success is an incredibly heavy burden. It brings complex problems, relentless demands on your time, and the constant temptation to soften your discipline. The man who achieves success through luck or loud manipulation will quickly lose it because he does not possess the internal architecture to sustain the weight. But the man who built himself in silence, who focused on his own character rather than the applause of the crowd, finds that the weight of success is no heavier than the weight of the discipline he has carried for years. He does not change when the money comes. He does not soften when the praise gets loud. He remains tethered to the exact same quiet principles that got him there in the first place. You must understand that the goal is not just to reach the summit, but to be strong enough to live there. And that strength is only forged in the quiet, unseeing valleys of your own relentless self-improvement. When you truly internalize this doctrine, you start to view the people around you through an entirely different lens. You stop comparing your behind-the-scenes reality to their carefully curated highlight reels. You begin to recognize the subtle markers of true, quiet strength and the glaring red flags of loud, fragile insecurity. This contrast is the crucible where human nature is truly exposed. To fully grasp the magnitude of what is at stake here, we have to move beyond abstract concepts and look at the flesh and blood reality of how this plays out over the course of a lifetime. We are going to examine two very specific paths, two unnamed, completely realistic archetypes that exist in every city, in every company, and perhaps within your own family. One is a man who was broken by the fire and chose to rebuild himself in absolute silence. The other is a man who spent his entire life avoiding the heat, only to be completely incinerated when a real challenge finally arrived at his doorstep. Their stories are a warning and a blueprint. Let us look closely at the first man. We all know him, and perhaps in our weaker moments, we have been him. This is the man who structured his entire existence around the avoidance of genuine difficulty. He surfed through his 20s on natural talent, a quick smile, and the dangerous ability to talk his way out of tight corners. Everything looked polished on the outside, but the internal structure was entirely hollow. He never stayed in the fire long enough to forge actual resilience. When the inevitable crisis finally hit him, a sudden market collapse, a brutal betrayal, a devastating personal failure, he possessed absolutely no internal anchor. The storm did not just knock him off his feet, it completely dissolved his identity. Because he had never practiced carrying a heavy burden in silence, the weight of real adversity crushed him instantly. He did not know how to suffer with dignity, so he panicked. And watch exactly what he does in the aftermath of that collapse. He cannot bear the excruciating silence of accountability, so he fills the empty air with noise. He becomes a professional victim. He blames the economy. He blames his upbringing. He blames a former partner. He blames an unfair system. He spends all of his remaining energy crafting elaborate stories to explain why his failure is not his fault. He is desperate for someone to validate his excuses, to tell him that he is right to be angry. He is leaking vital energy from 100 different wounds because he refuses to close his mouth and look in the mirror. He is loud, he is frantic, and he is permanently stuck. His life becomes a tragic cautionary tale about what happens when you prioritize your public image over your actual private competence. The harsh truth is that he will spend the rest of his days defending a version of himself that never truly existed. Now, I want you to turn your attention to the second man. This man also faced a devastating fire. Perhaps he made a catastrophic error in judgment, or perhaps life simply handed him an impossibly heavy blow. He was knocked down, humiliated, and abruptly stripped of his former status. But his response was fundamentally different. When the ashes settled, he did not run to the crowd for sympathy. He did not post a long explanation on the internet to defend his honor. He looked directly at the wreckage of his life, swallowed the bitter pill of total ownership, and he went completely dark. He stepped out of the arena of public opinion and entered the quiet, brutal workshop of self-correction. He understood that talking about his comeback would only dilute the energy required to actually execute it. He embraced the heavy, unglamorous isolation that true rebuilding requires. He knew that sympathy is a temporary painkiller, while silent accountability is the actual cure. He chose the cure, no matter how much it tasted like ash in his mouth. In that profound silence, he stripped himself down to the bare studs. He engaged in a ruthless self-audit, identifying exactly where his ego had made him weak, where his discipline had fractured, and where his knowledge was woefully insufficient. He did not seek scattered applause for trying. He demanded undeniable results from his own reflection. Day after day, month after month, he stacked quiet victories in the dark. He read heavily. He trained intensely. He rebuilt his financial foundation penny by exhausting penny. The people who used to know him forgot about his existence. They assumed he had simply faded away into defeat. They did not understand that he was not hiding, he was incubating. He was converting his public humiliation into private rocket fuel. Every time he felt the urge to prove someone wrong with his words, he bit his tongue and channeled that aggressive energy directly into his relentless execution. Years later, when the next economic storm hits, or a massive industry shift completely changes the board, watch how these two men respond. The first man, still clinging to his fragile excuses, panics all over again. He is blown away like dry leaves in a hurricane. But the second man, he does not even blink. He stands perfectly still as the chaos swirls around him, because he has already survived the fire. He knows exactly how to navigate the searing heat. He steps into the leadership void with a calm, terrifying certainty that instantly commands respect. He does not need to raise his voice to be heard, because his near presence carries the massive, invisible weight of earned resilience. This is the ultimate difference between a constructed image and a forged character. You cannot fake that kind of gravity in a crisis. It must be paid for in advance, in the dark, with the currency of silent suffering. This profound difference in ultimate outcomes forces us to examine the very resource that allows that silent rebuilding to happen. We have been completely misled about our most valuable asset in this life. You are constantly told that time is your most finite resource, that you must meticulously manage your hours and ruthlessly protect your calendar. But time is merely an empty container. If you have an abundance of time, but you cannot control your own mind, you will simply fill those hours with high-definition garbage. Your most finite, precious, and fiercely contested resource is not your time. It is your attention. Focus on yourself means reclaiming absolute, uncompromising sovereignty over exactly where your attention flows. Every massive corporation, every digital news outlet, and every superficial relationship in your life is actively fighting a war to steal a fraction of your focus. If you do not aggressively defend it, they will bleed you dry, leaving you with just enough mental energy to consume other people's creations, but never enough energy to build your own legacy. To stay silent and actually build in this hyper-connected era, you must ruthlessly defend your mind against the three great thieves of attention. The first thief is manufactured urgency. This is the constant frantic buzzing of a world that desperately wants you to believe everything is a five-arm crisis. It is the glowing notifications, the endless scrolling feeds, the emails marked high priority by people who simply lack the basic discipline to plan ahead. When you react to this manufactured urgency, you hand over the steering wheel of your life to the highest bidder. You become a perfectly efficient mechanism for advancing other people's agendas at the direct expense of your own. You must learn the immense, quiet power of letting small, irrelevant fires burn down to the ground. Not every text requires an immediate response. Not every passing trend requires your energetic participation. When you stop jumping at every artificial alarm, you reclaim your focus. The second thief of your attention is the paralyzing weight of unearned opinions. We spend agonizing, unrecoverable hours analyzing the judgments of people who have absolutely no skin in our game. We subtly modify our goals. We dilute our grandest ambitions. And we silence our own sharp intuition because we are terrified of what someone else might think or say behind our backs. I want you to ask yourself a very sobering, brutally honest question right now. Why are you handing veto power over your future to someone whose current life you have absolutely no desire to emulate? If you would not walk across the street to ask them for advice, why are you absorbing their uninvited criticism? Staying silent means you stop engaging in imaginary arguments in the shower. You stop trying to convince the cynical skeptics. You let their opinions fall completely flat against the brick wall of your own relentless daily execution. You simply refuse to acknowledge their noise. The third, and undoubtedly the most insidious, thief of attention is your own untested fear. It is the endless loop of phantom scenarios your brain invents in the middle of the night to keep you safely confined to your current reality. Your mind is an ancient survival machine, heavily wired to predict absolute disaster and avoid any perceived risk. It will aggressively pull your attention toward everything that could possibly go wrong if you decide to step out of line and demand more from yourself. If you do not actively command this fear, it will consume your entire mental bandwidth, leaving you paralyzed by 1,000 different fictional futures that will never actually happen. To defeat these three relentless thieves, you must construct an impenetrable perimeter around your conscious mind. You must stop leaving the front door of your brain wide open to any passing stranger or random anxious thought. You must build what I call the attention fortress. The attention fortress is a deliberate, uncompromising boundary between your internal vision and the external chaos of the world. It is a physical and psychological architecture designed specifically to starve the noise and heavily feed your focus. Building this fortress requires extreme, unforgiving ownership of your daily inputs. You cannot passively consume endless hours of mindless outrage, hyper-dopamine entertainment, and toxic gossip, and then expect your brain to suddenly produce elite-level clarity when you finally sit down to work. Garbage in, garbage out. You must violently curate your environment. You permanently silence your phone. You block the destructive digital escapes. You politely but firmly excuse yourself from rooms where people are complaining about circumstances they completely refuse to change. You treat your mental bandwidth like it is the most expensive real estate on earth, because it absolutely is. If an input does not serve your ultimate vision, it is denied entry at the gate. But here is what I know. Most men are secretly terrified of their own fortress. Because when you finally lock those heavy iron gates, when you shut out the noise of the crowd, the constant buzzing of the phone, and the cheap, easy distractions of the modern world, the silence inside that fortress is deafening. And in that terrifying silence, you are forced to finally meet yourself. You are forced to look directly at your own laziness, your own deep-seated fears, and the incredibly uncomfortable truth about how much precious time you have already wasted. This is the exact moment where the weak immediately unlock the gates and run sprinting back into the noise, desperate for any distraction from their own reflection. But if you have the quiet courage to stay in the silence, to sit with the agonizing discomfort of your own truth, something miraculous eventually happens. The muddy water settles. And for the first time in years, you can actually hear your own unshakable voice. Once you fully secure that fortress and establish true, unbreakable focus, you are ready to engage in the actual mechanics of elite growth. Most people are completely disillusioned with self-improvement because they falsely believe growth is supposed to be a smooth, beautiful upward trajectory. They buy into the profitable myth of the linear journey, where every single day is just a little bit better than the last. That is a comforting lie sold to the masses to keep them buying more books and more courses. True, deep transformation is violent, disorienting, and profoundly messy. It does not look like a straight, clean line. It looks like a grueling, repetitive, an exhausting cycle. I call this cycle the mastery spiral. It is a 6-stage process that you must willingly and repeatedly subject yourself to. If you try to skip a single stage, or if you refuse to endure the heat it requires, you will be permanently ejected from the spiral, doomed to repeat the same mediocre year. The very first stage of this ascending spiral is absorb. You enter the silence as a completely humble student. You drop the arrogant, dangerous assumption that you already know enough to succeed at the next level. You quietly study the masters. You read the heavy, difficult texts. You relentlessly gather the raw intellectual materials required for your new foundation. You become an absolute sponge, choosing to listen twice as much as you speak. But passively gathering information is completely useless without the heat of friction. This leads directly to the second stage, struggle. You take that new, untested knowledge and you force it into the chaotic friction of the real world.